Oh boy. Episode 3, titled The Secret, dives deep into the 20-year-old disappearance of Carol's ex-husband, Don. According to Don's ex-wife and kids, they claim that the last day that they saw him, he said that he was done, he was going to divorce Carol, and to just stay away from her because she is dangerous. Meanwhile, Don's executive assistant, Anne, would receive a letter from Don, but we'll get back to that in a minute. Don goes missing, completely without a trace. Police start to investigate everything. They say that they do believe that there was foul play involved. They also believe that Carol was involved, but there was simply no evidence to back up either of these claims. First, let's kind of back up a little bit. Both Don and Carol were married when they met each other. Carol had been married to an abusive man and had actually just gotten into a big fight with him at home where she said she actually had to throw a potato at him to get away. So she's walking down the street, she's crying, she's emotional, she's upset, when suddenly this car rolls up to her, Don inside, and tells her to get in. Of course, like, any rational human being would, she said no and kept walking, but Don was persistent. He pulled up a couple more times. Eventually, he pulls up and there's a gun sitting in the seat, because, that's not horrifying in any way, shape, or form. But surprisingly, Don tells her, pick that up, hold it on me so that you know you're safe. Just get in. I need someone to talk to. Not only does she get in the car and ride with him for several hours while they just talk about, their messed up lives, but she ends up spending the night with him. 4 years later, she finally leaves her husband and she and Don get married. Now, Don was already a millionaire at this point. People that knew him said that he even was one of these people that didn't want a lot of people knowing that he was rich, that he would bury money and things like that in the yard. Wanted people to like him for who he was. Which, hey, that's admirable. I like that. But Carol knew that he was rich, so, well, all that just goes right out the window. Now, a bit of a kind of a subplot to this video. Joe is barely in this episode, but he claims that he actually has Carol's diary, which the police had it, and they kind of read a couple of excerpts from it, so that's entirely possible. And he actually calls her out for the fact that she has gone after him so many times for the fact that he sells the cats. And yet, when she and Don were first starting out, that's exactly how they got their cats, was by going around and just buying them from auctions. Don would basically go to Costa Rica once a month to buy more cats or sell cats or, just a couple of different business ventures and things like that he was doing down there. Of course, he had a woman on the side while he was down there, and Carol definitely didn't like that too much. But not only that, Carol actually released an instructional video on how to buy cats. So not only is she doing it, but she's actually instructing others how to get into exotic cats themselves. And in the video, she even goes as far as to say that one of the most important parts of raising wild cats is to take them away from their mothers at an extremely young age, because that's the only way that they will actually get accustomed to people, because the people actually have to bottle feed them and things like that, things that they would do before they're weaned off of their mother. I swear to God that Hollywood could make the most messed up, this is like an AMC series, except this is real life. So as previously mentioned, Don had another woman down in Costa Rica, and he discussed with a couple of people, namely Anne that I mentioned before, his executive assistant, also his lawyer, and his handyman and mechanic, people that he considered to be his closest friends, that he was actually in the process of getting his affairs in order because he wanted to divorce Carol, but basically wanted to protect himself and his extended family by basically making it to where Carol couldn't try to take everything away from him in the divorce. Having said that, it could be very safe to say she found a way to keep it all. So Don gives Anne this envelope, right? Tells her just to hang on to it for the time being, but if anything were to happen to him, take this straight to the police. Well, after the disappearance, it turns out that he had tried to get a restraining order against Carol because she was violent and she had threatened to kill him and all of this stuff. She had taken his .357 and hidden it somewhere, saying she was going to use it to kill him. But because of the fact that there was no actual violence, it was just threats and things, the protection order was denied. So he wanted to, basically take all this information and put it into safe hands in case anything was to happen to him, that she could then take that information to the police and basically say, maybe you should have given me that protection order because, well, look what happened now. That happened in June. He would then disappear on August 18th. Don was actually going to be taking some cars down to Costa Rica to try to sell them. And Carol claims that the last thing that Don said to her was to get the truck ready for Costa Rica because he had to be at Miami early in the morning. On 2 separate interviews taken years apart, she quoted the whole early thing, almost like it was, kind of a rehearsed statement, possibly. Just saying, maybe that could be could be a thing. 3 or 4 days later, they find the van that was gotten ready at an airport. Now, it's important to note that Don did own several airplanes, but that none of them had left the airport. There was no signs of any planes at all leaving the airport, and Don's keys and briefcase were still inside the van. In typical bumbling police fashion, instead of investigating the van at the airport, they actually let Carol take it home, and then they didn't look at it for another 3 or 4 days. I mean, it just kind of feels like the cops, maybe it's like, I don't know, it's like they're just incompetent, or maybe, they're just really failing at their job, or, oh yeah, and by the way, Carol's brother is a member of the sheriff's department. So there's that. Meanwhile, in one of the best parts of this episode, Joe cuts back to Joe, and he's got the diary there, and it shows that Carol felt like she was boxed in, and she needed to find a way out. So, mentioned before that Joe's kind of a country music enthusiast. He made a music video called "Here Kitty Kitty."
Oh, here kitty kitty, mama made this for you.
In which Joe is singing dressed like a priest while a Carol lookalike follows him around feeding pieces of her husband to tigers. And oh god, it is wonderful. Yes, props to Joe. Props to Joe. I commend you, sir. So during this entire thing, basically, there's only one person that anyone is looking at, obviously. Don's kids actually wanted Carol's meat grinder to be tested for DNA. Can't imagine why, but the police said no. There also was a different theory that said that a new septic tank was being put in on Carol's property and that Don is simply buried underneath it. Carol, however, claims that the septic tank was already in place and that a house was already built on it and someone was already living there by the time that Don disappeared. Seems like that would actually be pretty easy to find out the truth on, dates and things like that. But what do I know? Going back to Anne from before, the executive assistant, in her office, she had a box that contained 2 copies of a will and 2 powers of attorney, all 4 of which she was the guarantor on. She was the power of attorney and all of those things for Don, for his will, for everything. Because as previously mentioned, Don wanted it to where Carol basically wouldn't get anything. Well, then Carol basically gets a hold of Don's handyman and goes to the office, has him cut the locks to the gate, cut the power to the office, cut the locks to the office, which all of this sets off the alarm and brings the police and brings Anne down to the property. And she goes inside, she takes the box that has the will and the power of attorney and all that fun stuff inside, which she's the wife, so there's not really much that the police can do there. And it's funny, whenever she brings the will back up to attorneys, Anne is no longer the power of attorney on there. Carol is. And the strangest thing here, but the wording on the document itself, where usually people say, upon my death or inability to make decisions. Well, his didn't say that. His said, shall not be affected by any disability or disappearance. Even asking Don's lawyer, who seems like he knows a lot, by the way, but maybe just can't say because, well, if you're, someone's attorney and someone's paying you for certain things, you can't really talk about stuff like that. But even he said that he has never once in his 37 years of being an attorney has ever heard any, wording on a document say anything about disappearance. Because you see, people expect that they're going to die, but not too many people ever really expect that they're going to disappear. So if you know anything about, legal stuff when it comes to disappearance, basically there is a freeze on all assets for 5 years. Well, as soon as Don disappears, Carol fires everyone. Anyone who worked for Dawn, they're now fired. She gets rid of everything that he owned that she could. Then, 5 years and 1 day to the day from Don's disappearance, she has him determined legally dead. And then basically gets rid of everything else. Now she's rich, she's got her cats, she marries this new guy, and all is happy in Carol Land. Fun little side fact, we find out towards the end of the video that Carol at one point in time also made a different video called The Science of Getting Rich, where basically she says that people, by acting a certain way or something along those lines, either on purpose or accidentally, can get rich.
The ownership of money and property comes from doing things in a certain way. Those who do things in a certain way, whether on purpose or accidentally, get rich.
If you know anything about body language, this is like the one point of like, this is my personal opinion that I'm tossing in here type of thing. But if you know anything about body language, people that lie tend to look to the left, because the left side of your brain is kind of where lies come from. So it's literally like, you know, kind of an unconscious tick, if you will, where you are literally trying to access information by looking to the left. This entire episode, anytime they ask her anything, it's, well, I think that, you know, da-da-da-da-da. And she never once looks at the guy. It's constantly to the left. But hey, again, I'm not an FBI dude or nothing. I'm just a guy with a YouTube channel, and that's just my personal opinion. Just saying. So the ex-wife and the kids, you know, they've been going through this whole thing, and you know, here's this guy that they love, you know, it's their dad for God's sake, and he's disappeared, and well, obviously there's a big scandal behind a lot of it. So there's a lot of news outlets, hard copy back in the day, things like that, wanted to come and, you know, talk to them, interview them, get their 2 cents worth, and they did for a little bit until Carol finally contacted them and told them that if they didn't stop, that she would take everything away from them. Not that they had a lot to begin with, because once the will came out, they only got about 10% for all of them, and Carol got the other 90. So yeah. And it ends on a nice little stinger where basically Joe says that he's taking on Carol because nobody else will. And that's episode 3, The Secret. And what a secret it was. I swear to God, this is like better drama than any TV show I've ever watched, and we're only 3 episodes in. We're not even halfway done here yet. So, to avoid, you know, making this video 3 hours long, on to episode 4.